The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
What are some of the lessons that we can learn about the Charlie Kirk assassination? Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello, welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Glad to have you on the Charlie Crime train today. We appreciate each and every listener, whether you're new or seasoned. By the way, if you are a new listener, please take time to reach out with a shout out. You reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you'd like to check out our sponsor, well, then jump right over to peacemakernetwork.com. peacemakernetwork.com. There you're going to see and read about the brave men and women who are running toward danger instead of away from danger. And once again, we're glad to have you aboard the Charlie Crime train. And hey, if you missed those particular links, don't worry about it. We got them all right there in the show notes. All you got to do is reach down and click, and you're right there. Well, again, welcome to the podcast today. We're going to take a dive into the profound lessons learned in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting. I guess you could say we would dedicate this episode to us not only looking at the events themselves, but maybe even some of the broader implications of those events. In other words, what lessons can we learn today to help us in the future? Now, in all probability, you've already thought about some of those lessons that you've learned from this event. And if you've been following Charlie Crimebuster, then I'm sure you may have a few lessons to add already to that. But today, we're going to kind of summarize lessons we've learned from the Charlie Kirk shooting. But before we get into that, we want to take just a moment and share with you what we share on every one of our episodes, a crazy crook story. It enables us to take a deep breath and just kind of relax in these trying times. So before we get into the main body, here we go. This is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. All right, our crazy crook story today has to do with a Mississippi man, not a Florida man, a Mississippi man. And after hearing about this story, I'm just a little afraid that maybe Florida might have some competition with Mississippi man. This was a Mississippi man who was charged last month with public intoxication. That was when, get this, he turned up to bail a friend who was arrested on DUI charges. Well, this guy, I think we might even talked about him before, but hang on to your hat. This same guy who was arrested when he showed up to bail up a friend who had been arrested on DUI charges and he himself was drunk, you can't make it up. He's been arrested again. Yep, again. And what? He's arrested again on a whole slew of charges. Now, these charges include driving under the influence, disregard for a traffic control device, and a seatbelt violation. That's according to the local police department. And, surprise, 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 our crazy crook did not even have a valid driver's license or even proof of his insurance. And the crazy thing about it, it comes less than a month after the same man arrived at the police station on August the 22nd to bond out another individual who had been arrested for DUI the night before. Both him and the person that were arrested were charged with public intoxication. Now, social media users, they had a really blast with this one. One wrote, "Why gonna be drunk, drive drunk, and get a drunk out of jail?" Another one said, "I guess drunks just stick together." But following his second arrest, it even got more incredible. Somebody said again, you can't make this up. Because, my friend, well, this crazy crook, he appeared to be wearing the exactly same outfit in his new mugshot that he had when he was booked a month prior. They actually reached out to the police department for more information. They said that no other information was available. So this crazy crook who made the crazy crook story because he showed up to bail out a friend being drunk, he did it a second time. And this time, he didn't even change the same outfit. He had the same outfit on for his mugshot. So this guy who apparently loves mugshots and loves being crazy is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to our main focus. One of the first things I want to share with you, a lesson that we learned, or we should have learned, and we should have known that lesson prior to this, is that there is indeed a vulnerability of soft targets. In other words, events in open public spaces, like university auditoriums, well, they're just really vulnerable. And without a strong perimeter control or vantage points, then, my friend, there are huge security risks. And so, I guess the question is, what I'm seeing as I'm reading more and more and reviewing and researching more and more, that more and more people are talking about what I talked about in the very first episode in this series. When I asked the question, could his shooting have been prevented? And unfortunately, the answer was yes. Now people are talking about the fact that, well, why was it that those roofs were not covered? Why was it that somebody did not think about having spotters out there or somebody to check on those roofs? Now here's what's amazing to me. The amazing thing isn't that we're just now asking those questions. The amazing thing to me is, why did not the security team ask that question when they first were securing the event, when they were thinking about the venue, when they were setting up the security plan? Surely there was a security plan. And in that security plan, why did someone in the security team not think about looking at those roofs? I don't want to just replay the first episode that I recorded about this shooting. But I do want to say, and I want to say it forcefully, I do not consider what I'm saying as Monday morning quarterbacking. I consider it common sense. Any security expert would take time to read about certain events when there's been a security breach so that you can learn how in the future not to repeat those kind of security breaches. The first thing I would have done if I was responsible for Charlie Kirk security or any protectee in an event like that was to think, somehow we've got to get those roofs covered. We're going to put spotters up there. We're going to put radios in their hand. They're going to have radio to the inner sanction team that's right around Charlie Kirk. And if they see a threat, we're going to scoop and go. We're going to scoop him up and go. Just like the guy yesterday in Tennessee Volunteers football game. Yay, go Vols. Just like the player there who saw the ball on the ground and scooped it up and took it to a touchdown, so would we as a security team scoop up our protectee and get them out of danger. Why that did not happen, I do not know. But I know now that it is a lesson that every security expert should take at heart. And the lesson was revealed to us way beyond this. In fact, it was revealed on a national stage when the guy took a shot at Charlie Kirk. Just this last week, we heard about the ICE location where there was another mass shooting and a mass shooter. And guess where he was? He was on the roof with a sniper rifle. I mean, I could tell back from Butler that we're going to see a repeat of that kind of actions. So why did they not plan for it? Lesson number 1. There are 3 rings. I know that I'm sounding very simple here because we have to get simple. It's kind of like, You know, the old football coach, the great football coach, Notre Dame, who brought the team in when they weren't doing so well, and he said, we're going to get back to the basics. The first thing he did, he held up a football, said, men, this is a football. This is a football. This is security. This is security 101. There are 3 layers of protection. There is the inner layer right next to the protectee. There is the middle layer that's out a little further from the protectee. Then there is the outer area, and it is that outer area where we're seeing a number of mass shooters shoot from. And those areas have to be covered. If you don't have the money to get a counter sniper team up there, if you don't have the backing of the local law enforcement agency to put counter snipers up there, then put spotters up there. Put people up there that are watching those roofs so they see anything at all suspicious. Radio down to your security team in the first circle, the inner circle, scoop and go. How much more simple can we make it? Lesson number 1, you got to protect the outer area. And you got to realize that there are security breaches when that happens. Now, there are some other lessons that we are learning today as we go along. And one of the other lesson that I want to bring to your attention is something that I've known all along, but this time it has been revealed to me in more clarity than ever before. Hang on to your hats, folks. It's a biggie. You can't believe everything you see and hear on the internet. You can't believe everything you see and hear in the news. Now, I'm not trying to be political here. I'm not trying to take one side or the other in the political spectrum. I have my beliefs, I have my convictions, and I'll be glad to tell you about my convictions. But right now, I'm talking to you about what's happening and what we're learning. I did not know much about Charlie Kirk before this happened. I may have heard his name, but I wasn't really focused in on it. But since that time, I, as you, we have been inundated. It's just everywhere. Everywhere there are these clips of Charlie Kirk. And I'm fascinated when I watch him debate these people. And I've watched and studied him. The person I did not know much about, I've watched and studied him to where I know quite a bit about him. And I do know this, that oftentimes I have seen where he has been misquoted. Oftentimes I have seen news about what he said, which wasn't really what he said. It has been taken out of context, it has been twisted, and some of it, they're just right out lies. And I'm sure that can happen on the other side of the political spectrum. So the lesson that you and I have is we have to make sure that when we hear certain allegations, when we hear certain things being said, when it's on the internet, we have to make sure that we really vet those stories. We say on Charlie Crimebuster very often, because people get in trouble all the time when they post things that are not true. We often say these words: pause before you post. Pause before you post. There are so many people out there, they just see a story and they just share it. Hey, I kind of like what that story said, so I want to share it. Why not just take a moment, take a big breath, and before you post that story, before you share that story, check it out. See if it is really true. And then you can get it out. I think there's another thing that we're learning about the Charlie Kirk shooting, is that in the event when there is a shooting like this, there is a lot of chaos. There is a lot of panic. And we have to be careful what we hear also in that time of chaos and panic. We know that immediately there were 2 arrests, within maybe minutes of the shooting. And we know it was reported that they have a suspect. And it was reported that they have somebody in custody. And most of us know that just because they have somebody in custody, it does not mean that they had the right person. But a lot of us don't know that, and a lot of people immediately thought that they have already caught the person. But it wasn't true. And that chaos, by the way, as we pointed out in last week's podcast, gave the shooter, it gave Tyler an opportunity to put more room between him and the shooting. It gave him more cover for his getaway. And I think as law enforcement people too, you've got to realize that. You've got to realize that just because somebody's there, even today, folks, it's, there's a lot of nut jobs out there. There are a lot of people who will claim things and take credit for things and confess things that are not necessarily the truth. And so there is chaos in those times. So when an event like this is going down, in those minutes after these situations, be very, very careful about what you believe. Take the side of an investigator. Investigators should be impartial. Investigators should follow the facts. And the fact was, they did not have the shooter. They did not have that shooter in just minutes afterwards. Now, I think that lesson we're going to learn with this, I think that one thing we're going to see, and I'm going to make a prediction here, I think one thing we're going to see is that there are going to be more and more of these mass shooters in the future that are going to try to plan a getaway. Just like last week's podcast, I said, could this guy have gotten away with this? Well, we know now that the rifle could not really be traced back to him, not without his father getting involved in it. So what if his father, what if his parents, what if they did not do the right thing? What if they just kept quiet? Then no way to track the rifle to the shooter. What if he had not texted his roommate and confessed what he did? What if he had just been quiet about it? What if he had just left the area, been quiet about it? Would he have gotten away? Well, I don't know whether he gotten away or not, but I guarantee he would have gotten away a lot more than the 33 hours that it took to get him, because his parents did the right thing, because he, as an idiot himself, first of all, he's an idiot for doing this, and then he was an idiot for telling everybody about it, he then got on that chat room, he talked too much. But if that had not happened, would he have gotten away? Now, why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because of this, and it's a very important part of what we're learning from this particular situation. I believe we're going to see fewer of these guys killing themselves and a few more of them that are really going to try to plan the crime in a way that they can get away with it. Hey, good example. Just over last night, when I'm recording this today, just over this last weekend, we had a different type of mass shooting. Remember that? It actually happened last night from when I'm recording this. 3 people were killed and 8 people were injured when a gunman fired numerous shots, now listen to this, from a passing boat into a crowded dockside at a North Carolina restaurant. That was just last night. Officials went on to say that an unidentified boater pulled up to the American Fish Company restaurant there in the Southport Yacht Basin, about 30 miles south of Wilmington, and he opened fire into a crowd of unsuspecting people. People were there eating around 9:30 p.m. The boater then took off up the intercoastal waterway. So here's a guy who had his own plan how he was going to get away with it. I'm going to do it differently. I'm not going to get on a rooftop. I'm going to get on a boat. And from a boat, he shoots into this crowd of people, and he takes off under the intercoastal waterway, thinking that he for sure was going to get away with it, and he may have, except for the Coast Guard. Yep, the Coast Guard was there. And they spotted that vehicle. Actually, they just spotted a person who matched the description loading his vessel, not vehicle, vessel, on a marina in Oak Island. This was approximately 5 miles west of the scene, around 10 p.m. And the Coast Guard got involved, and they got this person who is the alleged shooter. But the guy thought, hey, man, I'm going to get away with this. I've got a plan. My getaway plan. So I think what we're going to see, and this is a lesson I think we need to learn, is that we're in these mass shootings, and goodness gracious, we don't want to see any of them, but usually when you have one mass shooting, you see others. There's such things as copycats. as we're actually doing this particular show right now, on the news right now is multiple victims in a Michigan church shooting, and the church is on fire. It happened at the Church of the Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints there in Grand Blanc, Michigan. That was on the day while we're recording this. Now, they say that the shooter's down. There's no ongoing threat. So I guess the lesson is that when you first have these things happen, you can expect some others. Just like sometimes when you have a suicide, and then you have what is called suicide clusters. So whenever something like this hits the news, wherever you are, say to yourself, I need to be a little more alert. I need to be a little more careful. I need to watch myself, because there are people who copy this kind of behavior. And just like there are people who copy this kind of behavior, I believe just like in the situation of the Charlie Kirk shooting, in that situation where the guy was actually getting away with it for 33 hours, where the guy actually left, he didn't kill himself, I believe that one of the lessons is that this may be something that we're going to see more of in the future. That is not going to be every time there's a mass shooter that it's a suicide mission. That some of these guys are going to plan their getaway. We do know that the guy who carried out the mass shooting at the ICE facility in Texas, the guy who did that, we know that when they were looking at his own digital footprint, that he spent a whole lot of time studying the Charlie Kirk shooting. And in that, I'm sure he had somehow a way that he thought he might get away with it, although he did end up, of course, taking his own life. So there are some though that are going to go the other route. It's not going to be a suicide killing. It's not going to be a suicide killing. It's going to be more of, hey, I'm going to see if I can get away with it. I think that's a lesson we're going to have to take, and we're going to have to look for those opportunities, and law enforcement is going to have to be a little sharper in that we don't let anybody ever get away with one of these mass shootings. It just would be, it would be totally, totally terrible if somebody were to do this and get away with it. So we all have to be a little more careful when we hear about these things happening. We need to be a little more alert. We need to look at our surroundings. And if we do know somebody that's planning something, for goodness sakes, if we see something, we do need what? We need to say something. There's another lesson, folks, that we got to learn about this. I think we all were kind of taken away with this huge memorial service. Wow. An entire stadium filled with people with Charlie Kirk's memorial service. And the people that were there, it was just beyond comprehension at the things that they were saying. And I don't know where you are in your own life with your personal faith, but if you do have personal faith, it was certainly a moving experience to hear Charlie Kirk's wife, to hear her, Erica, to hear her stand up and say that she forgave the person who did that. That is Christianity, because that's what Jesus taught. And while there are some of us who say we could never do that, you got to remember that the same grace that people hang on to for their salvation is the same grace that helps people through tough times, and that's certainly the grace that she was relying on. But there's something that I have learned, and I am going to say this unequivocally without apology. I had a friend one time here in Florida, young man that I knew very well, who I had had time of knowing. He was another police officer. He was in a small town in Florida, and he was responding to a bank alarm. A bank alarm that continually was malfunctioning. If you've been in law enforcement, you know that happens quite a bit. And so a lot of times you respond to these things and you say, well, it's malfunctioning again. And if you're not careful, you get complacent, you get comfortable. And he drove up to this bank, drove right up into the front of it, and he was mowed down, executed. He didn't even have an opportunity to get out of the car, out of the vehicle. This situation floored me. This was someone I knew, someone I loved. When we were at his memorial service, which wasn't nearly as large, what could be larger than the memorial service for Charlie Kirk? But when I was at his memorial service, the pastor there said something that I will never, ever forget. He said these words. He said, eternal life is something that not even a bullet can stop. And that gives me great hope, because I do believe in eternal life. And some of you may not believe it. And, then I'm sad. I'm sorry for you. Feel sad for you. I respect you. I respect your right to believe anything you want to believe. But respectfully, you're wrong. And some people have said the words that there are no atheists in foxholes. And I believe that to be very true. That's why I find that so many of my brothers and sisters in law enforcement do believe in God, and they do believe in a life hereafter. They've seen too many things not to cause them to believe any differently. Look at this creation. Look at the world that we live in. You think that all this just happened by happenstance? That's like saying you had a whirlwind in a lumber yard and suddenly you have a house. No, there is some sort of divine being that put all this together. And I believe that being has other ideas for us in the next life. So there are some lessons that we can learn. We can learn the fact that we're going to have to be better about protecting that outer area. We can learn that not everything you read on the internet and everything you even hear in news stories is necessarily the truth. Remember, there were some really national news companies that were covering that they had caught the suspect. No, that wasn't true. It wasn't true. You've got to vet these stories. You've got to pay attention. Don't take everything as a grain of salt that you read or hear on the internet or even on your television. Take time to vet them out. Pause before you post. We also need to realize that there are probably going to be a lot more of these mass shootings. Talk to your kids again about what to happen and what happens at school if there is a mass shooting. Make sure that your school district has proper protection for your children. If you have your kids in a private school, make sure they have armed security protecting them. Make sure they do drills, that they know what they're facing. Vitally important, because if we know anything, these things are probably going to continue to occur. And we need to do what we can to protect ourselves the best that we can. Realize that they may be even more mass shooters now, because some of them may have the idea they can get away with it, as we've seen happen in some of these other situations. So there you have it, some lessons that we've learned. And don't forget the most important lesson, that eternal life is something that not even a bullet can stop. You say, how can you say that? And I say that because of my faith in Christ. And, maybe more of us ought to talk about that more openly. Anyway, this is Charlie Crimebuster here, thanking you for being a part of the Charlie Crime Train today. And so until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert, for the life you save may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional information and podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.